In a move that only a social pariah like Martin Shkreli could love, and in fact, Martin Shkreli has publicly defended the decision of pharmaceutical giant Mylan to increase the cost of an Epi Pen, a life-saving medication used by people with lethal allergies, by 600%. It cost Mylan $4 to produce an Epi Pen. They've been selling it for $100, pretty nice markup. But they just changed it to $600. This has been in the news because it's one of the worst cases of capitalism run amok in our ill-advised marriage of health care and the profit motive. The government gives taxpayer-funded grants to researchers to develop a drug because it will benefit the citizens. But the government doesn't hold the patent on the work of the researchers, something that may already have something wrong with it before we even get started. But then the developer is allowed to sell the patent to a for-profit pharmaceutical company. That pharmaceutical company does not exist to make people well. Pharmaceutical companies do not exist to heal illnesses or to spread happiness. The pharmaceutical company exists to make money, period. Make money, period. That's it. They look for return on investment. In a capitalist system, then, they are motivated to make all of the money that they can possibly make, regardless of the impact on people. So they will price their product not based on what it costs to make, ship, sell, market, store, but solely on the price the market will bear. And that is why many drugs cost 5 or 10 or 100 times as much in the USA as they do in other countries. The system is rigged to avoid competition. They can exploit people who will die without this particular medication. Now, when capitalism is applied to an automobile manufacturer or someone that makes or sells shoes, you can always choose to buy a less expensive car. You can choose to buy a used pair of shoes at a thrift store. But a kid who will die in seconds from a bee sting doesn't get to shop for a better deal. They get to use an Epi Pen, and it costs $600. In the face of public outrage, Mylan Pharmaceuticals agreed not to lower the price, but to offer a 50% discount to those losers that couldn't afford to pay the full price. Clearly, this was just a smokescreen to make it look like they were doing something decent, when in fact they absolutely were not. And as the plot thickens, the CEO of Mylan paid herself a multi-million-dollar bonus for coming up with this brilliant plan to pick the pockets of the most vulnerable human beings in the country. And the icing on the cake is that she, Heather Bresch, is the daughter of West Virginia's Democratic Senator Joe Manchin. Oh, and one more thing. They are now moving their corporate offices offshore to avoid paying taxes on these outrageous profits so that they can make America great again. She is defending herself by saying that the problem is with our health care delivery system, and in that we agree. The problem is that our health care delivery system is run by moral midgets like her. Amen. Thank you. I knew somebody was listening. And he's got laryngitis. I don't know what the rest of you. It's not because of evil Republicans. In this case, it's because of evil Democrats. Because it's not a partisan sin. It is, I believe, a cultural blindness, which makes it now the business of the church, right? Morality, culture, that's us. Capitalism is so interwoven into our psyche that it's very nearly removed from the universe of moral examination. We just about can't question it, that profit is so much a part of what it means to be Christian North American that we don't even get to question it. Because capitalism itself, we should recognize, has no ethics. Capitalism doesn't have a morality, and therefore there should capitalism should have absolutely nothing to do with health care. Folks, what could be more obvious than to say that it is immoral to make a profit off of people being sick? I mean, there are times and places that you make money, but not off of people being ill. Plain and simple. I'm convinced that there is no such place as hell. I just don't think that it exists. That doesn't mean that there shouldn't be one. Thanks, Mel. And I don't want to sound judgmental. We're very open-minded liberals here. But shouldn't there be a hot place of eternal torment for people who take advantage of people because they're sick? Amen. Okay, that actually was pretty judgmental, but you're all in it with me. So we are open-minded liberals who occasionally have really closed-minded moral judgments. Capitalism is an economic system that produces a lot of incentive for invention and for productivity. And in that sense, capitalism is a driver of a successful economy. But it can also mask immorality and rapacious greed. Even at points where it clearly produces evil results, it is so baked into our thinking that we have difficulty saying when we are rewarding innovation and productivity. I mean, if you are able to invent new products, if you're able to innovate, if you're able to manufacture better, if you are willing to work extra hours, if you're willing to find ways to be more productive, we want to reward that. But do we really want to reward the super wealthy who are just exploiting the opportunity to skim the cream off the system? Now that I've clearly exposed the moral failing on the Democratic side of the fence, I'm going to claim the right to speak to one of my favorite sermon illustrations, the Republican nominee for the President of the United States, Donald Trump. When Donald began his bid for the office of the president, he promised that he would self-fund his campaign. That was part of the attraction to blue-collar and poor workers, was that he wasn't going to take any money from anybody, because if you take money from someone, then you owe them something. You know, that's how it works. And it was easy to claim when he and the rest of the world thought he had absolutely no chance of winning. But once it became clear that he might actually win the nomination, this whole business of self-funding just evaporated like the morning dew. His success has surprised not only liberals and conservatives alike, obviously it has surprised Donald Trump. Now that things are getting real, the whole ruse of self-funding has been thrown in the trash, and he is now begging for political donations from the very donors that he swore he would never take money from, and that he knows good and well only make political donations in order to tie strings to an elected official. But the old pay-to-play system, with all of its government for sale implications, has not stopped the ultimate con man from finding a way to make a profit off the system. When Trump was funding his own campaign, he was paying $35 a month on the offices in Trump Tower, where his campaign headquarters were. Now that the campaign is funded by donors, he changed to $170,000 a month that he is charging to his donors, a five-fold increase in a month in the rent charged for those offices. Now, why is he doing this? Simple. Because he can. That's the capitalist system. But is he being rewarded for being inventive or productive? No. He's just scamming the system. And the system protects him from being able to steal from his donors. This is capitalism turned malignant. It makes capitalism look more like cannibalism than it does an economic system that motivates innovation and productivity. And yet his campaign is billed as a populist movement. Now, I sometimes don't sleep well after I hear that said. The working poor champion him because they believe that he is on their side. In a recent campaign speech, he talked about some of his specific economic policies to help the downtrodden middle class. He talked about the rank unfairness of the estate tax that he calls the death tax. You pay taxes your whole life, your whole working life, you're paying taxes. And then they tax you for dying. And the crowd roared. But of course, the crowd doesn't know that you have to have an estate worth more than $5 million to pay any estate taxes. There's probably no one in his entire crowd that has the slightest vulnerability to an estate tax other than Donald Trump. Virtually no one there had any dog in that fight. It is the removal of estate taxes is to allow the super wealthy to establish a permanent aristocratic class that can take advantage of the poor, period. In the same speech, he promised to help working families by allowing them to fully deduct their child care expenses. Again, the crowd cheers. Sounds pro-family, right? But a tax deduction only helps families that make enough money to itemize on their tax returns, which is fewer than 1/3 of the families in America and just a tiny fraction of young families raising children. So again, allowing a tax deduction for child care expenses is literally forcing poor families to subsidize the elite child care services of the very wealthy. But again, this mentality is baked into the bread of our society. Trump doesn't want to pay estate taxes, so he rails against them, and his completely unreflective audience cheers. It is an equivalent of shouting out, "Long live the king." The rich view the middle class and the working poor as being the moral equivalent of firewood. And it turns out that the 1% is almost always chilly. The capitalist makes money through investment of capital. And I want to be clear about this. If you earn a salary, you are not a capitalist. You may support capitalism ideologically, but you are not a capitalist. You are an employee. And if you are employed by the government, you are a part of the socialist economy. Public school teachers are not capitalists. They're paid through a socialist system. Members of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines are not capitalists. They are paid through our socialist military. Veterans benefits are socialist. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, federal flood insurance, SSI disability, these are all socialist programs. Our society's heroes, our firemen, our police, even the CIA, the FBI, the secret agents we make movies about, the NSA, the TSA that everybody loves to hate, the EPA that protects our air and water and land, they're all socialists. So who is a capitalist then? One example that comes to mind is Paris Hilton. She's a capitalist. She makes money by investing money, and she gets a return for her capital. If you have capital invested, that's what makes you a capitalist. Now, that's intentionally prejudicing, I guess, to say Paris Hilton, but Warren Buffett is a capitalist, Donald Trump is a capitalist, but I'm not, and I never will be unless you people start paying me a lot more than you've been paying me up to this point. The talk about a revolution that was a part of the Bernie Sanders campaign was not the same as the Trump campaign to convince the poor to vote for the special privileges of the super rich. The revolution is not, of course, about Bernie Sanders. It never was. The revolution we need is a moral awakening that allows us to see plainly how capitalism without social moral filters is inherently evil. There is a way of being intelligently capitalist. We are not doing it very intelligently right now. Amen. I love this column from David Brooks that we read today, and I never thought I would quote David Brooks in public, but I think going through a divorce and having to watch the Trump campaign, I believe that David Brooks has discovered a conscience that he didn't know he had. And it's coming as a surprise to him and me, but But where he realizes that European settlers in the first few years of the colonies in America, that white Europeans were leaving their civilization to join Indian tribes, but no Indians were coming to join and become capitalists, even when captures had taken place. You capture people from white settlements and they never want to come home. You capture Indians, bring them into a white settlement, and they did want to go home. Because in their tribes, everyone was expected to work for the common good. In Indian tribes, they're almost never separated from their children by their work. What they do is done with their families. They're together, and they share their food and resources equally. There's not fat and starving Indians in a single tribe. Franklin, as smart as he was still a slave-owning, successful businessman who couldn't understand why anyone would fail to see the moral rationale that justifies greed. He just didn't understand it. He was mystified that people would like to live with human dignity rather than try to make a profit. The revolution comes when we will no longer accept the assumptions that profit is superior to people, or that those who own capital have a right to exploit those who provide labor. The only war that has ever existed in human history is a war between capitalism and labor, and that war has never stopped. It finds multiple iterations, but all wars are a war between capital and labor. Our nation is out of balance, and the correction will come. The correction will either come at the ballot box or it will come in the streets. As John Kennedy said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution necessary. And that's not a threat. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. And you know me, I'm always on the side of the facts. Let me conclude with a quote from, I'm going to butcher her first name, Arundhati Roy, an Indian writer and activist. She writes, "Our strategy should not be only to confront empire, but to lay siege to it, to deprive it of oxygen, to shame it, to mock it with our art, our music, our literature, our stubbornness, our joy, our brilliance, our sheer relentlessness, and our ability to tell our own stories, stories that are different from the ones that we're being brainwashed to believe. The corporate revolution will collapse if we refuse to buy what they are selling, their ideas, their version of history, their wars, their weapons, their notion of inevitability. Remember this, we may be many and they be few. They need us more than we need them. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. And on a quiet day, I can hear her breathing."
You have been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at Reverend Dr. Ray at AOL.com for more information.